Hi everyone, welcome to Teachers of Tomorrow, a webinar series hosted by the Better India in association with Dell India. I'm very excited to have all of you guys here today just before Teachers Day to discuss a very important topic. How is India redesigning education in a world that is changing with every passing second? We have millions of students in elementary and secondary schools, and for them, the delivery of education has drastically changed overnight. So what's happening? What are the problems that educators are facing? What are the solutions that they're coming up? What are the innovations that are coming up in this field today? We are here to discuss all of those things, and joining me are industry experts who have been driving large-scale impact on the ground through their various initiatives. They have been closely associated with the problems on the ground and have been working day in and day out to come up with solutions. So strap in as we discuss everything from new teaching methods, the role of technology in the process of education, the many challenges we are facing and the solutions, and so much more. So we'll get started. I'll dive right into it by introducing you to our panelists. Joining us today is KK, also known as Mr. P. Krishnakumar, who is the Senior Vice President, Consumer and Small Businesses at Dell India. He has been with this company since 2007. He is focused on deepening PC awareness and adoption in India through online and offline customer engagement. KK instituted Dell Aarambh in 2016 as Dell India's PC for Education initiative. Dell Aarambh addresses the future digital Indian with a focused engagement designed especially for teachers, students, and their parents. Thank you so much for KK for joining us today. We also have Santosh Par. Santosh is the founder and managing trustee of Think Sharp Foundation, which is a not-for-profit social enterprise working to bridge urban-rural education divide by providing quality education infrastructure and resources in various villages of Maharashtra. Santosh, it's so awesome to have you today with us. Shukla Bose is another panelist with us today. Shukla is the founder and CEO of Parikrama Humanity Foundation that is focused on educating children across slums in Bengaluru. As a member of Karnataka Knowledge Commission CII Education Committee, Shukla has been contributing towards shaping and influencing education policies at state and national levels. Thank you so much, Shukla. It's great to have you today with us. We also have Osama Manzar. Osama is the founder and director of Digital Empowerment Foundation, DEF, that works with the mission of overcoming information barrier using digital means and tools. In the last 1.5 decades, DEF has been able to reach across 23 states with presence through digital resources in 170 locations in 80 districts through more than 400 staff and volunteers. Osama, thank you so much for joining us today on this panel. And last but not the least, we have Anand Prakash, who is the co-founder and head of academics at Vedantu, which is one of India's leading online edtech companies. Vedantu enables students to learn live with some of India's best teachers. Anand is an alumnus of IT Roorkee and has been a teacher for over 10 years. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today on this panel. And we are so excited for all the inputs and insights that we are going to get from you. And thank you so much for the audience who have joined us now. I'll quickly set some ground rules for everyone who has joined. If you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A box and we'll be taking them in the end of the webinar. If you have to say hi to the panelists, please go ahead and use the chat box. For questions, let's use the Q&A box and we'll be taking questions at the end. So, right to set context, KK, we'll begin with you. If you had to define what does redefining education currently mean for you, and what are the different, if you could give us an overview on the various efforts by Dell Aarambh towards this thing, towards redefining education.
Okay. Yeah, Tanya, so I would start the conversation by first talking about Dell Aarambh and then come back to redefining education. Right?
Sure.
When we looked at the landscape, and we found that, 5 years ago, when we looked at the education landscape, we realized that in India, technology was not being used as a tool for educating the children, neither by the teachers nor by the students. And we were comparing this with the developed markets and also the developing countries like Malaysia, Brazil, China, right, Sri Lanka. And we found that the technology adoption in education was very low.
Right.
And we then decided that, to find out what the problem was. A child looks up for inspiration and is motivated by either the teacher or by the parent, usually the mother. And one of the problems of technology was that both the teacher and the mother were not trained to use this technology or PCs for teaching a child. Hence, we said, let's address the root cause. And we went to tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 cities. And we identified over close to 5,000 schools. And we trained about close to 100,000 teachers, right? And we trained about 30,000 teachers over the last few years on how to use technologies. And we also trained in the process about 130,000 mothers on how to use a PC to teach the child. The whole idea being that if they can use technology, they will be able to inspire the child and continue the path, encourage the child to continue on the path of curiosity through use of technology, right? So that's how we started the entire Dell Aarambh program. Then you see, we realized that we are only able to impact a certain set of people. And we also realized that we were ahead of the game in terms of how we were trying to use technology to transform. What this pandemic has brought about, Tanya, is very interesting that today we are forced to go to an online learning mechanism. But what Aarambh taught us is that this cannot be successful with only one person looking into the whole education system, or one company looking at the education system. It has to be the ecosystem. So when you look at redefining the education space, broadly what we said is that, hey, look, there has to be three aspects of it. One is it has to be more more outcome-based than output-based, right? That's one critical shift that needs to happen. Second shift that needs to happen is that the entire ecosystem and all the stakeholders, which is the student, the teachers, the parents, the educational institutions, and the government, everybody needs to come together to make this work. It cannot work with only one person working on it, right?
Sure.
And then the third aspect, or the third pillar, was in terms of saying that this technology way of teaching or use of technology in teaching enables us to put the child at the center. It in some ways goes back to the old Gurukul system of evaluating and assessing the potential of a child, and then letting the child use his or her own path or trajectory of learning and enhancing their knowledge, right? So to me, that's the three different aspects by which the education would get redesigned and reimagined in the new world. And I think the new education policy encourages us to walk that path.
Sure, these are some really interesting insights that you have brought in. Thank you so much, KK.
The biggest challenge is we have to make sure that they will digital literate, and beyond just outgoing and incoming, they should learn all the features of the digital device where they can access the online learning. So these are the couple of really challenges, especially in the rural area we are facing.
Sure.
There is one more I would like to point out here. Most of the platforms and technology are differ from state to state and even from school to school.
Yeah.
So there is no universal platform available. Okay, because of lots of barrier. Either platforms are not affordable, or even if affordable, probably they are either in English. Probably students from the, let's say, a vernacular language in Maharashtra or some other states, probably they are not able to understand what it is written on that platform. So that is again a biggest challenge we are facing, and that I'm seeing from the very closely, because we work closely with students at ground. And having the different platforms and different applications and having not a universal platform is another biggest challenge we are facing, Tanya.
Yeah, no, sure. Those are some of the really big problems, Santosh, that you have highlighted here. Osama, if we had to come to you with these challenges, there has been also a lot of reforms brought across various cities individually, in villages as much as possible across the country overall as well. So, there are reforms, changes, minor tweaks, major tweaks. Of these, are these changes here to stay? And if you had to pick which one of these, of the changes that we are talking about, should we keep, which ones are temporary fixes?
Okay, great. this is a time of pandemic and restrictions and isolations and all that.
Yeah.
And, where we all are actually trying to find technology to give us a solace of, rest and backrest and everything,
Exactly.
So obviously we are suddenly, expecting too much out of technology, so obviously the challenges is very, very high. On one side, like KK said, PC, Aarambh's PC penetration is because of, you enable, and if you look at the quality education, how can you learn on a smartphone? How can you learn on a small device? But look at the industry, look at the social media. Everybody is only thinking of providing a smartphone to the child, as if that all the problems will be solved because of the smartphone. But let's try to, see, like we have Anand, we have Santosh, we have, so many people here. We also have great stories coming from the hills of the, Northeast and the remote areas of the villages. But what is the large problem? In your introduction, you have clearly said 200 plus million children, UNESCO said 320 million children. Now, suddenly, what is the situation? Situation is such that we are actually taking education from school to home. That's the real situation. Previously, we were going to a corner of our society, community, or location to get education, what we called as education. Now education is coming. Kuan pyase ke paas ab ja raha hai. So it's something like taking the education in the school, in the home. Then your target group is just not the child. Your target group is the home, the space, the parents, the social behavioral change, etiquettes of networking, etiquettes of muting, etiquettes of, dealing with each of the participant, and so on and so forth. All this is in the middle of something that is not there. We don't have access. So access, actually, you see, access to connectivity, access to device, access to a space, to have the education for 8 hours or 6 hours or 3 hours. Where is the space in the house? Separate, isolated space. Then access to training, capacity building, and learning etiquettes and all that, and then the whole social and behavioral change. Certainly, pandemic is democratizing technology to reach every house. But the point is availability of devices as an access point, availability of connectivity and bandwidth, because most of the remote areas, even if you give a smartphone, our connectivity is only 2G. Incidentally, technology allows you to have the video conferencing so that the teacher can come online on the other side and teach you. But you need bandwidth. All of us here, there's 6 people on the panel and the 2 people from the organizers, itself require a huge bandwidth because we are working on audio visual. And when we are taking teaching and learning, we are actually taking the entire bandwidth issue, online in a real time. So those are the issues that requires policy, infrastructure, industries to play a role, and at a large scale, decentralize the entire requirement that I have classified one by one. Of course, we all are in a position to create, island of case studies. You can make some island, I can make some. We have 700 centers all over the country. I have no problem in 700 locations. I can bring all the students. But India itself has 250,000 panchayat. India itself has 1.4 million schools. All those schools are now going to 200 plus million, household. So when you take education to household, what are the challenges that we have to go through? I must say that we have platform, we have technology, we have medium, we have providers, we have content. The biggest thing at the moment we need is 3 things: access, access, and access.
Okay. Yeah. I think from your answer, I got two slogans that we can use for 2020 throughout our lives: etiquettes of muting and access, access, access. Thank you, Sama. I think, Shukla, we are hearing a common problem across the board. And as someone who's been working with students in diverse sectors in the city, what do you think is the best way to respond to disruptions in the academic year so that no child is left behind? Shukla, sorry, I think you're on mute. I'll just, yeah.
Okay. So, Tanya, I'm glad you asked me this question because I started Parikrama after leaving my corporate world of 26 years. I started Parikrama in 2003 with the primary purpose of giving equal opportunity and education to kids from the streets and slums. We don't work with rural children, we work with kids from the slums because in the slums, the problems are beyond poverty. It's also dysfunctionality. You know, children come from dysfunctional homes. So to provide equal education, obviously technology was an important element that would sort of, you know, give our children education at par with you know, mainstream children, coming from mainstream schools. But I've never been a great fan of technology being the sole panacea for education. I've always believed as a practitioner, and I've been running my schools, 4 schools and a college, and we have 2,000 children, nearly 1,000 children have graduated. They are now software engineers, lawyers, doctors. So we are proving that it is possible to take children from the streets and give them a different quality of life. We never ever thought that technology was going to be the way to do it. But because we believe equality in education, irrespective of where the children come from, now at this point, because of pandemic, we didn't want our children to be left behind. So, and you know, I do understand what Santosh, Asuma, or Osama have said. I mean, the problems are absolutely genuine. Access is an issue, but you know, we had to deal with it step by step. First, our children were starving. The parents had lost their jobs. So we first dealt with that. So we began distribution of rations. And while we were distributing rations on a weekly basis, we said, here's an opportunity to reach out to the children. So we would send them, you know, assignments in hard paper and send them, or we would send them. Then we began sending them audio clips to the children. Parikrama believes relationship with students is the most important thing. And how do we bring in relationships in the digital world? I mean, that's a question, right? So what we did was we first sent audio clips, and then obviously our kids did not have smartphones. Their parents, one of the parents may have had, but and they were unemployed, they had lost their jobs, so they were at home. So initially we could use their parents' smartphone, but we knew it wasn't a long-term solution. So what we did is we did a drive amongst our donor community, friend community, to get their spare phones. And this happened all through lockdown. And we got them couriered, dunzoed to us. We started using old spare phones, and we were able to deliver nearly about 600 such phones across our children. But we knew that we have 2,000 kids, 1,800 really needing intervention. So what we did was we got them to work together. 2-3 kids work sitting in a corner of a house. Of course, we had 3 weeks training of teachers, because teachers themselves were not, tech savvy. We had to find champions in the community, in the slums. We had to have parents who volunteered to support the program. So it was a very collaborative effort. You know, we couldn't do it just in verticals. So we had 2-3 kids sharing one phone, and we started classes. I totally agree that how can you have quality education with a smartphone? We know that's not possible. But the whole idea is, while other schools, mainstream school, elite schools, the privileged kids are continuing with their lessons, why should these kids be running around in the slums, being exposed to unsafe, hazardous conditions, not only because of COVID-19, but also because of antisocial activities that happen. We didn't want, it is estimated that about 10 million children will drop out of schools post-COVID. We haven't had any child drop out as yet. We have had about 85-90% attendance. Of course, it's not an 8-hour class. We've designed our curriculum, our lesson plans in a manner which we know the attention span of the children are less. And so it required a little bit of redesigning, reimagining lessons. But my take in this is that if you have the will, it's possible to do it. It will never be perfect, but at least you're continuing. The whole idea is for these kids from the slums, it is important for them to have an identity of belonging to a school, of being proud of being a part of Parikrama. And we didn't want that disconnect. So we've used technology to stay connected with our children.
Awesome. I think, Shukla, this is a great example of making the best use of what you had. And even some people in the comments are saying, Ms. Bose, a superb initiative by students and teachers in distributing mobile phones. So that's awesome. In fact, that reminds me of a story I would just like to quickly share with you guys, because I came across it today, where in a village, this group of volunteers, they started making lessons and distributing them in pen drives to their volunteers. And these volunteers then started conducting lessons on loudspeakers, and kids would just arrange around the houses, and they would interact from there, also shout and give answers, and they would give. So it's just like finding the best solutions in the current situation is, I think, the crux of how we are dealing with this as well. Anand, I'll come to you. I know you would have something to say about all of us saying, how can you give quality education on smartphones, because you have been doing that. And you have been, as an online platform, you have already seen the hurdles and the advantages and disadvantages of delivering education purely digitally. So what are some of the insights and learnings from your journey that you would like to share for those who are making a transition today? Anand, you're on mute. Yeah.
So I've been listening to the great panel here, and definitely a very valid point mentioned by all of them. And one of the valid point and the hurdles as a technology company that we also face is the access. And reaching out to the tier 3 and tier 4 or tier 3 cities, and not restricting ourselves to tier 1 and tier 2. So when we started our journey in 2014, our limitation was only tier 1. Because typically the affordability was the question, and we were also checking that whether students will come live or not. And it started happening that students started coming, they started taking session, and we realized that we need to decrease our cost so that we can reach to the lower strata, and everyone can come, and actually in real sense we can democratize education. So in that journey, what we did was we did a lot of technology interventions, wherein we filed few patents. Also, we were granted patents in US, because we were able to lower the bandwidth such that our entire thing can run on 2G platform as well. In 2014, there was no technology was way behind, and infrastructure, especially when it comes to internet, was far behind. So we had to develop and rework on that technology, and we recreated the whole infrastructure around that. But today, in the last 4 or 5 years, we have seen that infrastructure has developed in the country. And although I would agree with the panelists that a lot of the students who are actually living in the tier 3 cities and the lower strata do not have the access, and only 40% of the population have the access to the internet. And that is one challenge which government and the private players, we need to solve it together to reach it to the masses. But at the same time, we have seen that once these students have started accessing these infrastructure, there's a great improvement. Because earlier in my past journey, also in the previous venture, we saw that there is a dearth of teachers in smaller towns. And I'm not even talking about the villages and the even lower strata. So I'm just talking even about second tier cities. There was also a dearth. And when we started this, we started seeing that the teacher who were in the tier 1, we were able to get them. And we also created in the process a lot of great teachers like recent mothers or people who were working in great companies who wanted to contribute to education. They gave into platform for a part-time thing and they started connecting with the kid. Because at Vedantu, we believe it's not only about the subject. It's about the connection and interaction with the student, because that uplifts the student. The subject is just a mere, I would say, it's a medium of telling about better things about life. And the journey has been remarkable. We started with 1,000 hours of live teaching in 6 months time. And today we have in last 1 year, we had 1 million kids studying on our platform in 1 year. But during this COVID time, we had seen monthly users who are studying at Vedantu is 1 million. It's gone to 1 million. So that has been a journey, and learnings are plenty. I would love to definitely have a detailed discussion that how students are also taking advantage, because getting access to a great teacher is something that this technology is solving. Maybe we are not able to solve all the 4 aspects of learning, which is like physical learning, because learning is, and all education is about 4 aspects. One is about physical learning, the second is social, the third is moral, and the fourth one, the last part, we are trying to solve it, which is academics, right? And in the way, we are also trying to imagine that how we'll be solving this moral and social thing, because community we are trying to build, we have learned that how to build great communities. Few of our communities are around 60,000 users in one platform, and they are interacting, helping each other, and we have done that. Social we are working on, but physical we will never be able to solve, and that we'll leave it to school for always to solve, because that is where social gathering and the physical aspect will be catered to. That is very much required, but at least one part, at least we are trying to solve.
Sure, no, sure, that's very insightful. We'll also be coming to talk about in detail about the connection and interaction between the teachers. KK, I quickly wanted to go back to what you had brought up, ecosystems and the need to work together. So like if you could throw some light on how can we unify and collate the fragmented efforts across the country that are happening, that even we are seeing on this panel right now, different kinds of efforts happening at different places to adapt to a new and perhaps more powerful mode of education. So how could we unify and collate these different kinds of efforts?
Hey, Tanya, I think all the panelists bring about a very valid point, right? And Osama brought that we have 200, and I think you said 250 million students, or anywhere upwards of 250 to 300 million students.
Yeah.
And how do you reach them, right? When we started Aarambh in the first 2 years, that's what struck us, that, hey, even with 100,000 teachers, we are able to impact only about 1 million students, right? And then when we looked around, there were a lot of people like what Anand is doing, what Shukla ma'am are doing, and everybody is doing their bits and pieces. So what we did is that, as an association, we have an association of IT manufacturers in India. So we just got together and said, hey, can we at least create a policy document in terms of what do we want from the government, right? And we did not involve ourselves as an industry. We invited the NGOs, we invited educators to be part of an expert body, and we worked over a year. And then we created a document called EduVision 2018 and said, hey, let's now talk to the government on what exactly are the issues and also probable solutions, right? And as the panelists mentioned, issues like accessibilities were a key thing. One of the other thing was unreliable power supply, right? We're going to have technology, and it was not the pandemic issue at that time. We were talking about technology in schools, not at individual homes. But power supply was an issue. Inadequate resources and training was an issue. Maintenance of any infrastructure was an issue. Even if you had a digital device, if it got spoiled, who would maintain it? How would you maintain that, right? And I think Santosh brought that in terms of content. Can we have content in the vernacular medium? Because that's how children learn in most of the schools. And then this document also created a vision in terms of how can we solve this, and broke it down into 5 parts, right? One was in terms of saying, how do we build capacity? Capacity in terms of students, capacity in terms of teachers, capacity in terms of institutions, and capacity in terms of parents, right? Because everybody needs to be digitally educated or digitally literate, whatever you call it, for the entire ecosystem to start working. The second was in terms of e-content, saying that, hey, can we have content developed, and can that be in the various vernacular languages, so that every strata of the population can benefit from this, right? Then we talked about the ICT infrastructure, and we said, hey, look, we need to have a policy and a framework. And what we said is that we proposed that we can have a framework from level 1 to level 5, because there are different stages of technology evolution. There are people who are technology ignorant to people who are technology evolved. When I say people, I'm talking about students. So students need to have access to artificial intelligence, those who are advanced. Those who are not advanced, they need to have the basic of how to use a PC or how to use a smartphone, how to use a tablet and learn, right? And this is for students, for teachers, for everyone. So we defined different levels and said, hey, let's have this classification of schools and be able to see how technology can be classified. Then we said, okay, we also need to encourage research and innovation. So we have worked with Atal Tinkering Labs and to see how do we multiply that, because the government is doing some framework, and how do we multiply that. And the last pillar was in terms of saying, how do we monitor and how do we evaluate and assess teachers and students and institutions, because it's just not enough to just throw everything out there. We need to see if it's actually working and then do. And the last critical part was, it came and finally boils down in terms of money, right? Where will you get money to do all this? So we also provided a CSR framework and said, hey, companies can, we borrowed the idea from the government's, program of providing toilets in every schools and home. So we tried to make it a CSR initiative for education and provided a framework by saying, hey, if smaller companies can even contribute or adopt a school, they could start with as low as 300,000 rupees, 3 lakh rupees a year, but that will help in terms of adopting a school and providing the basic infrastructure. And depending on the level of investment they want to do, they can scale up. But the whole idea here was to try and give a framework where the entire community can come together and solve it. And I just want to bring a point here that, look, when we look at 250 million students, we have to be a little realistic. We will not be able to provide everyone everything from day one. But if you start the journey, and that's why I'm encouraged with the new education policy, because it helps in terms of set that framework, and then it provides an accelerated way of moving. So as Shukla ma'am said earlier, the people are not in favor of technology because they were not sure what technology could do or how technology could help their children. When you buy a motorcycle, when you buy a television, when you buy a car, you see, or a washing machine, refrigerator, you see instant benefit of it. Some physical effort is taken away. But when you buy a digital device for education and it's for your child, you're probably going to see the benefit of it a few years down the line, right? And in today's world, I look at it, I say, look, break the devices. Don't be fuzzy about what device people are going to use. Today, it's a crisis emergency situation of the pandemic. So we need children to consume content. They need to be taught what is happening. Even if it is one way, it is fine, because it's better to get some education than no education, right? So they will get that one-way communication through mobile phones. But to the point that Osama said, I completely agree with him, that is not going to help in the long run. And this pandemic is not going to be here in the long run, right? So we need to create a nation of what I call content creators, right? Okay. So from a content consumption to content creators, as the children move to adopting technology, children, teachers, parents, institutions, you will find that the evolution of technology, evolution of devices will also happen, right? But I think this pandemic is forcing us to start the journey, and start the journey on a mass scale, which then helps the larger population, right? And I think everybody will contribute, and everybody has to contribute, and that's why this framework that we gave is hopefully helping. A lot of this had been taken as part of the new education policy, and pretty encouraged that with that we should see some transformation over the next few years in this country.
Okay, it's so interesting, KK. You brought up vernacular languages, and it's so amazing that you guys thought about it also, and also the point about governments and working with them and taking their support and help as much as possible. So actually, Osama, I wanted to talk to you about that, about what can government bodies and policymakers do to help everyone across the board move to, again, right now, since we are talking about that, a more digital mode of learning, which can, act as an equalizer.
Okay, I just want to also highlight that, there is a lot of innovation coming from the existing scenario,
right, yeah, for sure.
No doubt about it. Like KK said that, even the minimum ways of looking at solving the problem is most welcome. I mean, sure, because we have a large problem. We cannot have just one solution to all the problems. And for example, there is a program that we do called Going Online as Leaders. What we do is that just video call on WhatsApp. just video call. There is a mentor, and then there are 4 or 5 children or tribal girls, and all they do is just conversation, you know, and that has helped in leadership and education and all that. And Ministry of Tribal Affairs have adopted it for as a scheme. But what I'm saying is that the number is concerned. I would say that, you know, coming back to access kind of thing, I would say that from the policy perspective, it may be a very good idea if the policy adopts where we create schemes of, can the children have subsidized cost of connectivity? Can the children have subsidized cost of loan for buying devices, you know, from the industry? Apart from, because, you know, we were just looking at donation of, you know, digital daan is something that we have started where second-hand machines or the devices can be donated and can be distributed. What we realize is that a smartphone is available in 3,000, 4,000, 5,000, you know. So if they are subsidized from the perspective of either government can give loans or government can convert the NREGA job into a payment system in such a way that, you know, you can convert that wages into buying a hardware or a software or something, the access will become much more, because the more pressure we put on bandwidth and the device makers, the better it is. You know, if suddenly there are a lot of buyers, then obviously in the volume game, I'm going to, you know, make my PC available at a lower cost, you know, or a deferred payment. So, you know, subsidy on device, subsidy on connectivity, subsidy on you know, teaching and learning software and other things is really going to go a long way in enabling the environment, you know, in the mass scale. Because in any case, we are not going to see that all this education, you know, will be free of cost for the children in the villages, because going to a school is still costly, you know, for the government. Now, if you think that the device have to be given by the government, each household, it will be like a, you know, millions and millions and crores of rupees. So better that we come out with an educational scheme for subsidization or cost cutting or loan subsidization, and also talk to ISPs in terms of bandwidth, in terms of, you know, subsidization, like the way we offer hardware for students at a lower cost, 25% lower cost or something like that. Can it become a mass scale policy?
Okay. Yeah, that's definitely a very important point and a very important question to ask in terms of, like, that's also one of the confusions I feel like. If, okay, we are asking for solutions, what all to ask for, but this also definitely seems to be one of the priorities that could be focused on. Osama and KK both brought up innovation, Santosh. So what have you seen, like, or if you have not seen, how can we innovate so that the urban-rural divide that we are seeing, it does not become wider through this year when we have a different set of challenges already. We don't want the urban-rural divide to become wider in terms of education. So have you seen some innovations that have come up in that front, or are there any suggestions on how can we innovate?
Well, I think KK and Osama has mentioned the valid points where how we can provide the more access. Osama has clearly mentioned how we can give the more access to the digital device. Okay, but that is, we are talking about in terms of the current situation, pandemic. But we have to look beyond the pandemic. The pandemic might be end in next, probably in a month or 2 months. Most of the state government has already started discussion on starting the school by end of this month or next month. So even if we provide the digital device to everyone, by next month, they are coming back to the school. And then again, question comes here, then how the school can deliver a digital education. Okay, that is our main topic, you know, before the pandemic. So that is again a question we have to discuss, how the schools can adopt the technology and how we can bridge the digital divide between the rural and urban, considering the school as well. So that is really most important aspect of the discussion. So I think to bridge this, we don't need a more innovation, to be very honest. In rural areas, what they are looking for a very basic access and basic technology. Because so far, as I mentioned earlier as well, we work with more than 50 schools across the Maharashtra. And today, if I go to the school and ask how many students have seen the laptop or a desktop, I trust you, you know, more than 50% would say they haven't seen a desktop or a laptop in their life. You know, this is the situation. Forget about the working on a computer machine, forget about the working on a tablet or a smartphone. But they haven't seen the machines yet. And that is the, you know, real situation in the rural areas. So we need to, again, the same question comes, how we can give them more access, and beyond the access, how we do literate them to use the technology. Most of the schools, Tanya, and I will mention here Osama and KK as well, that government has worked hard from the beginning, from 2005-6. They have set up the ICT labs and infrastructure in various schools from secondary school and onwards. But if we look at what happened with those ICT labs and infrastructure, I would say, it's just on the paper. Yes, a couple of labs and schools, they have really worked hard and they implemented very well, but most of them completely failed. I have seen that the infrastructure is dumped in the single closed room. They cannot throw even. Our policy does not allow to throw infrastructure out of the school. We are in such a mess. Forget about bringing the new machines. We cannot dump the older machines. Teachers are using the same older machine, just they have occupied the space just to make sure that the machines are installed. We social organization then take a role and make sure that the old machines are removed from the school by working with all the stakeholders. We involve the government as well, and make sure that we bring the new machines and make sure that they literate and they start using the machines. So we have to go very deep and in this problem. Giving just access will not solve the problem. Everybody has a lot of work to do and we need to work on to make sure that they use the technology. We maintain the infrastructure. KK had mentioned the point earlier very well. Even if government provide, even they subsidize the devices and even they distribute the devices, who will maintain the devices? In existing schools where the government has already provided the ICT lab and other infrastructure, digital classroom, projectors, there are thousands of projectors has been distributed by various state governments to make sure that schools get digital access. What happened with those infrastructure? Just a month or two, they are just out of service. There is no maintenance. So we have to look into those problems as well, beyond the giving the access and giving the connectivity. How we can give them a proper, one is education on users of the technology, and second, the maintenance of the infrastructure which we provide. I think if we work on these 2-3 problems, the large part of the divide can be solved between any international school in cities like Mumbai, Pune, or any other metro city or tier 1, tier 2 city, and the rural. So we need to sensitize all the stakeholders, teachers, government officials, to use the maximum level of technology and the maintenance of the infrastructure provided.
Sure, that makes a lot of sense. Shukla, if I could quickly get your views on what we were talking about, right? The student-teacher interaction. So how have you seen that that dynamic change right now in the digital way of education? And are there some ways that you are making sure that it does not get affected, that kind of dynamic in the classroom, the student-student interaction, student-teacher interaction, those are remaining maintained through this period?
Well, online classes and using digital technology and devices has opened our eyes in many ways. I agree with Santosh that we have to sort of, get to the root of the problem. And so when we began, and remember, we are also working with government schools. So it's not just Parikrama schools. Okay. So, we began with the parents. We began with the teachers.
Sure.
We did a 3-week training program long before our online classes have been going on now for a little more than 4 months. A lot more than any other school. That's because we planned it much earlier. In early March, we knew it was coming. Even before the 22nd of March, Band and all that was called, we started preparing. But we had to get all the teachers as well as the parents on board to understand. So we had a 3-week training program for our teachers. And there are many things that we need to address. I mean, why have teachers been earlier reluctant to embrace technology in schools for marginalized children? It's because, I mean, look, how many teachers have lost their jobs? How many teachers haven't got paid as yet? And sometimes they are sole bread earners in the household. We didn't do that because we felt that, we'll cut costs in different ways, but we must keep the teachers on board, because they're the ones who are most important, who will execute all the planning. Whatever we do is jilts if we don't implement it. And who are the implementers? It's the teachers in the school and parents in the households. So we got all of them together. And now I thought online classes have brought in a lot of positive elements. For instance, this was one way of getting away from rote teaching, because teachers have been forced to actually look at how to curtail a lesson in 20 minutes and not 40 minutes, and make it interactive with little breaks. So there is a technique in it. And we taught our teachers that. So now they're making it a lot more interactive. They're actually inserting their lessons with lots of videos so that the children are engaged. Because now, see, students are a lot more independent. Because they can just, sign off and go off the class. Nobody has that kind of physical control over them. So it is up to the teachers to make the lessons so interesting that the children on their own make the choice to stay on in the classroom. So I think what has happened, it has brought teachers to understand the children and which children respond to what kind of teaching. That sensitivity is a lot more heightened. We also bring in, I think online classes has brought in a lot more transparency, because we have the coordinators, the quality heads, we have the heads of school that are actually moving from class to class, which they couldn't have done physically. And it's not possible to do so many. Remember, we have 4 schools in a college. So, for the heads and the leadership team to get involved, to go into the classes. Now, because it's online, it's possible to do that. And so this opening up the doors for anybody to see, teachers have become a lot more open to feedback. Because, so I think the collaborative learning, collaborative teaching is happening. Children as well are working together with each other, and children that have understood something are actually helping the other child who's a little behind to learn. So I think those are very, very positive elements about online teaching. It's very important to transfer this transparency, collaborative learning, a certain sense of gratitude that, we are all together in this moment of crisis. That sense of spirit needs to be transferred even when we start a physical school. So Santosh said, that schools will open in the month of October. It will, but the risks will not go away. And therefore, schools have to come in staggered manner. So a certain bit of a hybrid program has to be evolved, where part online, part physical, so that, safeties. Because see, schools like us that are inside the slums, they have space constraints. Okay, so we cannot have the whole school functioning at the same time. All the planning has to be done, and we are in the process of doing it. But I think online classes has brought us all together to fight a challenge. What we call it, the leadership team of Parikrama calls it our war room. We actually sit down. I mean, sit down means virtually sit down and say, this is the issue in this particular school with this kind of family. How do we deal with it? So the connectivity, while we are physically apart, we are actually communicating a lot more. we should be able to transfer these elements into a physical school when things become normal.
Great. I think I have so many questions, but given the constraint of time, I'll be moving to audience questions. And I think, Shukla, that answers one of our audience's questions also, who was asking about what happens post-COVID. So I think you answered the question about moving in a very phased manner and doing it in a very proper manner, taking learnings from both currently and what we were doing previously, mixing them and moving into a different methodology. KK, we have a question for you, and this is by Prabha, and she's asking, is it possible to have keyboards in vernacular languages, as if the letters are in vernacular and available at large scale?
Yeah, look, again, this is something which you're working on right now. I think the way it works is there are a few languages globally that we have. I think one of the things that some of us in the industry are working on is the Hindi language, but yeah, there's some work happening in the background right now on this.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you, Prabha, for your question as well. We also have a few common questions around these lines of emotional, social, and mental stress. So Divya has asked, how can we encourage teachers, because they have been going through a lot of emotional, social, and mental stress. Any one of you would like to pick up that question?
Yeah, I would. We have created what we call the Parikrama listening post. Okay, where it's a little helpline where for not just teachers but students as well as parents, and they ring up, leave a message, we respond with a school psychologist. We realize that teachers are going through stressful because they're having to run their classes sometimes from the kitchen. They have their 3 kids running around. It is stressful for many of them. So as an institution, there are many ways to diffuse that stress, and we take it on ourselves to do that. For instance, we have a surprise day, where just a day before this week or day before, we say, today is a day when you're going to have a hair washing day. Okay. So go ahead and take a break. And because it's sudden and not on the cards, it's a delight for the teachers to take a little break. So I think the leadership team in organizations must be sensitive that I keep telling my 200 teachers that, look, the very fact that the children are coming to your class is your success. Please do not put too much of pressure on this. We want our children to be inside their house, be safe, and not run around and be prey to all antisocial elements out there. That itself, the very fact that you're keeping your children safe by keeping an interesting class, don't worry about outcomes. We'll deal with the outcomes. If it comes from leadership, then the stress level gets diffused, because otherwise this finishing of portions, getting children ready for exams, that's very stressful. But if you say, look, hang on, make sure that the children stay in your class, make it interesting, sing a song, do theater, we are doing debates, we are having music lessons, we are doing yoga, and we are doing physical education online. That relieves the stress. So you have to just be innovative, be sensitive towards the teachers, and understand some of the difficulties that they are going through.
Sure. Osama, I want to ask you, and I also want to then take the same question to Anand. Tomorrow is Teachers' Day, and this is the year that the teachers have just, of course, with the students, we are all focused on students. We are trying to come up with solutions for the students, but teachers and 2020 has been a whole different ball game. So what is your message to teachers? Like, if you had to give a message to them celebrating Teachers' Day tomorrow, what would that be?
I would say, for the first time, please listen to children.
Okay. Right. Yeah, I know. I've been hearing so much from some teachers who are relatives and everything about managing the class online and being able to go through. That's why I really latched on to what you had said about the etiquette of muting, because that is a thing. It is a very real thing in the teaching world right now. Anand, what is your message to the teachers?
See, I would say just remove the fear of technology and just go out there and start, embracing it, because it is going to stay now. The things will not be the same what was before the pandemic, and it will, whether if it comes back, the situation will be a little bit in between, and you have to embrace the technology, and therefore it's very good time to start your own YouTube channel. So YouTube actually caters to the nooks and corners of the country, and we have seen a huge amount of students coming to these free platforms. So please go out there, and if you feel that it is tough, it's not tough. Just go out there, sit in front of just any device, mobile device or any device, and just start teaching. And trust me, you will start getting a lot of things out of that. And as Osama rightly said, start listening to the students, because now everything is out in open. Everyone is watching, and therefore you cannot hide behind the four walls and teach whatever you have been teaching. So you have to embrace, you have to be open. And as Shukla ma'am said, that you need to actually embrace and you have to be creative and bring lot of creativeness in your teaching. By bringing a lot of 3D animations, and because it is online, you can bring a lot of content power to your teaching.
Sure.
So these are a few of my points, but technology is really, really powerful, and it's not difficult.
Awesome.
Hey, Tanya, sorry, I just want to add to that. When we were doing this Aarambh program, there's a principal, Mrs. Gauri. She's a principal of Sindhi Vidyalaya in Coimbatore.
Okay.
And she's over 2 decades of experience, and then they started adopting technology. And she made a great, profound statement, which I think all teachers should remember. She said, technology cannot replace a great teacher, but technology in the hands of a great teacher can transform the society.
Right.
And I think that's the key thing. It's a collaborative tool. It's not a replacement tool. That's what I think people need to keep in mind. That would be my submission to all the teachers.
That's awesome, KK, and I think that's a great spot for me to summarize this as well and close this out. Technology is not something that can replace teachers for sure. All the teachers listening to us, you guys are doing a wonderful, wonderful job this year. So many of us can't even imagine how you are going through what you're going through. But of course, technology in your hand is all the way more powerful, and it can transform society. And thank you so much, everyone, for your very, very insightful lessons that you have given us, talking about ecosystems and how they can work together, talking about access and the huge importance of it. And also what KK had said, I think I'll close this session with that very strong lesson of start the journey and then let's see. So start the journey is what I will say to end this. And thank you so much. Thank you so much, Osama, Shukla, Anand, Santosh, KK, for your time today, for spending this time with us. All the comments in the chats are saying this has been really insightful, and many people have learned several things from here. So thank you so much. And you guys have a great weekend ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Danya. Thank you, everyone.